Well, hello, everyone. My name is Sharon Spencer with IAAP, and I want to welcome you all to Mobile Accessibility on the Move. Before we get started, I just want to review a few system items. Everyone should be logged into Adobe Connect, or you can follow along with the presentation that we provided and over the phone. However, you do need to be connected to Adobe Connect in order to hear the audio for the videos that Kathy plans to play today. That audio comes through the computer, not over the phone. So you can access both the handout and the videos through the handout link that we provided in the confirmation email that you received when you registered, and in the reminder email that was sent out a few days ago. So if you do have trouble with the audio for the videos, we do have links to the video on that handout page. And I'm just seeing that Pramila is saying that he's not able to hear anything. So let me just go ahead and
yeah, Sharon, you were going in and out for me as well.
Okay, interesting. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you fine
Okay. Now. Okay, very good. That must have been a problem on my end, so thank you. Okay, so I just want to reiterate, if you are having trouble hearing the audio for the videos, first off, you need to be connected via Adobe Connect. You need to make sure that your speakers for your computer are turned on. And if you are connected via the phone only, we do have a link to the videos on the handout page that was in the confirmation email or the reminder email that we just sent out. So just wanted to recap that quickly. During today's webinar, if you want to ask a question or make a comment, our speaker, Kathy Walbin, does plan to stop for questions throughout and at the end. If you have a question, you can type it into Adobe Connect. If you look on your screen, or if you're using a screen reader, we have an area that's called the chat area, and there is a text box. You enter your question or comment in the text box and hit enter or click on the send icon, and then Kathy will address your question when she gets to a good stopping point. For those of you who are connected via the phone, I have put everyone on mute to guard against background noise. If there is time at the end of the webinar, you can unmute your phone line and ask a question over the phone. To unmute your phone line, it's #6. That unmutes, and then *6 puts yourself back onto mute. Or again, if you're connected via voice over IP, just put a message in the chat and we can unmute your microphone. If you are hearing audio over both your computer speakers and the phone, you can hang up the phone and just listen via computer only, or you can turn off your computer speakers and listen via phone only, but again, you need to turn the computer speakers back on when the videos are played. And when Kathy is presenting or in showing the videos, you can zoom in. You'll see that there is a full screen option. There's both a full screen icon, or if you look at the options on the SharePod, you can select full screen in order to see that better. And then lastly, I want to remind everybody that we will be recording this webinar. So again, thank you for joining us today for Mobile Accessibility on the Move. Our speaker today is Kathy Walbin. She is the CEO and founder of Interactive Accessibility. And she's also an accessibility expert in ADA, Section 508, and WCAG 2.0 compliance. Kathy is an experienced digital media designer with extensive knowledge of accessibility and usability issues and solutions. And Kathy is also co-chair of the W3C Mobile Accessibility Task Force, and she's an invited expert on the W3C WCAG 2.0 working group. So we are delighted to have Kathy with us today as our speaker. So Kathy, thank you for doing this webinar for us, and I'll turn things over to you.
Great. Thanks, Sharon. I'm so glad to be here today. I see a comment just about bad echoing. Probably you've got your speaker on your computer and on the phone. Sometimes that will cause an echo, so maybe that could be one of the problems. All right, so let's get started. Today's topic, as Sharon mentioned, is mobile accessibility on the move. What we plan to talk about today is define what mobile accessibility is. What are we talking about? You know, mobile can mean so many different things, so let's get a definition, working definition of what we're really talking about. Identify the accessibility standards that you need to follow for mobile accessibility. There's a lot of questions that I get every day about, you know, what do I follow? What do I do? How do I know when something's accessible? What do we do for mobile? Mobile's accessibility is required, and we're wanting to do that, but really, okay, what do we do? How do we get started? And so we're going to talk about some strategies there and talk about some of the resources that are available that actually the Mobile Accessibility Task Force under W3C has been creating. We're also going to talk about strategies for organizations and how to ensure mobile accessibility and what you can do. All right, so let's get started. What is mobile? All right, so we're going to do a poll very quickly, and I just want to get some of your thoughts and ideas about what is mobile. Just type some things, what comes to your mind when you hear the word mobile. We're getting a lot of really great things. Android, hands-free, small tablet, phones, tablets, voiceover, apps while moving around, content catered to a device, small screen, tablets, accessing information on the go, smartphone. All of those are great, definitions of what mobile is, and mobile can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. When I looked this up for the definition of what is mobile, a couple definitions came up in the search results. Mobile is of or relating to cellular phones, handheld computers, or similar technology. Mobile technology is the technology used for cellular communication. A mobile device is a generic term used to refer to a variety of devices that allow people to access data and information from wherever they are, and this includes cell phones and portable devices. So when we're talking about mobile, we're really talking about a lot of different things. We're talking about the devices that we think of every day that you mentioned, Android, iOS. But really it goes beyond that, and it's really a device that allows people just to access data and information wherever they are. And so it does include Android devices, tablets, and cell phones, and other devices. And when we think about mobile and just the usage overall, it's really increased exponentially. Smartphone use over the last 5 years has increased significantly, and the capabilities of our devices and the number of different devices has increased. And mobile is more than just phones and tablets. We've got car interfaces, we've got video game controllers, we've got smartwatches. Probably some of you on the phone have got the new iWatch that now allows you to do almost the same things as you can do on your tablet. It's just got a smaller screen. It also allows us to do some other things that we couldn't do before. And there's a lot of other devices. And these new devices come out every day, and there's new features. If we look at the global market share of devices for mobile, really when we look at this, and this is the stats up from December 2009, well, a little bit before that, all the way through the end of June of 2015. So when we're looking at that worldwide, the usage, Android devices are leading by far. The number of Android devices is somewhere around 60% right now. iOS is also one of the top ones, but it is lagging at about 20% overall for global usage. Now, if you look at the usage across different countries, you'll find that the percentages differ. So, for example, in the United States, it's really flipped. There's more iOS users than Android users, and the same thing with the United Kingdom, in England, the same thing. And you'll look at, really the difference overall, and it really depends on, what the capabilities are, what the infrastructure are, and what types of devices they're actually using. But Android and iOS by far are the two leading devices that are used globally. Mobile internet use continues to increase. Smartphones and tablets have caused the internet use to increase overall. People are now connecting through multiple devices. Probably if you think about your usage of mobile over the course of a day, you're probably using your phone. You may be using your tablet. You may be using your laptop or your computer. Most of us are touching multiple devices in a single day. We're not just using one single device and consuming information just on that one thing, but we're really looking at this across the board and using all sorts of different devices for all different ways and consuming all different kinds of information. And when we look at the mobile landscape, mobile's really changed the way that we're consuming information. Now we're in noisy public places that makes it more difficult for people to hear audio from their phones. We may be using it one-handedly. I might be walking down the street with groceries in one hand and my cell phone in the other, or maybe holding my child's hand with one and trying to type a text message. I may be out in bright sunlight, or I might simply be by next to a bright window that's streaming in bright light. I might also be interacting with the touch screen instead of a keyboard or a mouse. I might also be in situations where I have busy eyes and hands. I could be in a car driving and I need to interact or send a text message. And many new cars today are even becoming more sophisticated where you can have it speak all of your text messages. You can conduct phone calls very easily. All of it is voice activated right through your car interface that's connecting through your phone. And people of all ages are using mobile. It's not just the younger generation. It's not just people in business. Everybody is using mobile, and it's really changed the way that everybody's doing business. Even in the schools are now having to restrict students' access to cell phones and other devices, but are requiring students to have those devices because it's a way that they're communicating with students. And so when we're looking at the mobile landscape, things have really started changing the way that we are consuming information. Mobile also provides a lot of new opportunities. Mobile devices can be cheaper, although some devices are quite expensive still, but tend still to be cheaper than a high-performing laptop or desktop computer. They're portable. We can take them anywhere. We can also connect anywhere. There's not too many places that you can't go where there's not Wi-Fi or cell phone coverage today. You can easily reach a network of people. If I don't know something or I need something, I can easily get to somebody and have them answer a question. There's many applications out there right now for people who have visual impairments who want to know what something is. They can simply take a picture of something and it'll either scan that barcode and tell them what it is, or they can crowdsource it and get answers from people. You can also do that in a grocery store. If I want to know what something is on the shelf and I'm walking down, I can easily scan and use the camera. Also, the key assistive technology is built in. Those tools that people with disabilities need in order to interact with their device is right there. They don't have to buy additional software. You don't have to set up any additional things. It's right there. You don't have to do anything. It's already all set up. It's already all there. And Also, with mobile, the assistive technology automatically gets updated when the operating system updates. So you don't even have to worry about updates and changes to things other than the changes to your device operating system. And mobile also provides custom experiences. There are so many new features, and we'll be talking about some of the new features that are coming in iOS 9 shortly. But when you're thinking about all of the different sensors, all the different things that are part of your mobile phone or your tablet, we can now easily know where somebody is. We know if it's light or dark outside. We can do proximity sensors, accelerometers. We've got the camera. We've got the microphone. We can easily switch screen orientations. We've got so many new opportunities to customize experiences. And more than ever, we're seeing mobile really change the way that we're designing and creating applications because we're making it easier for users to use it. And we're trying to do things that, you know, for example, if I've got a form, I'm automatically filling in their location. I no longer have to ask the user to do that because I already know that information. So you can confirm that with the user so that they don't have to have a lot of data entry that they have to do, because data entry tends to be a little bit more difficult on a mobile device than it is when you've got a full keyboard. All right, so my next poll question. On the screen, I have several different devices. I have a Microsoft Surface. I've got an Asus, I've got a Windows tablet, and then I have a Dell Latitude tablet as well that's connected to a docking station. So are these mobile or are these PCs? So go ahead and put your results in the into the poll questions. All right. So we have a number of people. They could be both. A lot of people think they're both. All right, so we have almost 70% of you, 67% of you looking at this being both. Some of you see that they're PCs, a few of you, 4%, 28% mobile. All right, so let's go ahead and end that poll. And let's go back to the PowerPoint. All right, so when we're looking at whether or not these are mobile or PCs, really, when we're looking at things, many things are now the same. It is getting harder and harder to really know whether or not something is mobile or whether it's not. And when we look at the differences between something that is mobile and something that isn't mobile, it really comes down to the way that people are interacting with the devices, their primary way of interacting, still on the desktop or your laptop. If you have that and you've got a keyboard attached to it, your primary method of interaction is probably still going to be the keyboard and a mouse. If you're on mobile, your primary interaction is going to be touch, because that's what's readily available on each device, and the keyboard's not necessarily readily available. The other big difference is simply the operating system and the assistive technology, the tools that people with disabilities use. So when we're looking at mobile and whether or not something is mobile or something is not, really what we're talking about is simply the different ways that people are now interacting. You know, we've got touch, we've got keyboard, we've got, sometimes we've got different devices, switch devices. Sometimes we're using the, for example, the camera as a switch device. We could be using the touchpad as a device. Really, when we're looking at the way that we're interacting, it's going to, that's going to differ between mobile and desktop. And then the only other difference is the actual operating system. And we have that right now between Mac and PCs. This is no different. This is, you know, we've either got iOS, which are Apple devices, or we've got the Android platform, which is all of the tablets and phones. And so when we're looking at those two platforms, the system that's available, what's there and available is going to differ. And the level of accessibility that you can actually achieve is going to be based on that actual device and what it actually offers. And we're going to get into a little bit more of that in a minute. All right, so given that, what is mobile accessibility? Again, I've got a poll up on the screen. If you can type some of the things that come to your mind when you hear the words mobile accessibility. All right, so we have a number of people who are saying voiceover, ease of use for all people, serious. We've got all users able to access information, accessibility on mobile, assistive touch, complete access to all features and functions or with AT or input methods, screen reading, alternative access, all sorts of different things. And absolutely, most people who are, when we talk about mobile accessibility, are going to talk about and think about, oh, screen readers. We're talking about voiceover, because that's really what we hear a lot about when we're talking about mobile accessibility, is we need to make sure that it works. And right now, voiceover is really the leading screen reader on mobile, where it's got a lot more features and functions available, and it's much easier to use than some of the other platforms. I really like the definition that came out of the resolution agreement with South Carolina Technical College System, which was an OCR compliance review with the Department of Justice and the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights. And what they said is accessible means that a person with a disability is afforded the opportunity to acquire the same information, engage in the same interactions, and enjoy the same service as a person without a disability in an equally effective and equally integrated manner with a substantially equivalent ease of use. The person with a disability must be able to obtain the information as fully, equally, and as independently as a person without a disability. And if you stop and think about that just for a minute, we're not just talking about making sure that a person with a disability can interact and access information, but we're really trying to make sure that they get their experience is equally effective, it's equally integrated, and they have an equivalent ease of use. Note that I didn't say that they had a same ease of use, but they've got an equivalent ease of use, because they're going to be using different software programs, different devices, different input methods, for example, than people without disabilities. So what is mobile accessibility? It really means that a user with a disability can use a mobile device, websites, and applications as effectively with an equivalent ease of use. But when we think about mobile accessibility, we really all get into situations where we're challenged, just like people who have a disability need some assistance in accessing their device. There's smaller everything, screens, keyboards, fonts, touch areas, so we all can get into situations where it's harder to interact with our device. We might be accessing it on the go. We might be in a very bright location where it's harder to read the screen, or a noisy environment, so it's harder to hear it. We could be in a situation where, we're just trying to do things on the go, and we've got it one-handedly, and we're trying to navigate and do multiple things all at once. So we all get into situations where we're challenged on mobile. When we think about the level of accessibility on a device, there's several factors that impact mobile accessibility. The device itself. The device has certain capabilities built in. If the device isn't capable of doing something, if a device, for example, doesn't have a screen reader, to produce an auditory version for somebody who can't see the screen of the content that's presented, then they're not going to be able to interact with that device. So the device needs to have certain capabilities. It needs to have the potential to have accessibility, assistive technology, and settings that helps users interact with the device. We also need to look at the different assistive technology that's available. Different devices are going to have different assistive technology. On iOS, things are pretty much the same across the board. It has the same different settings. But when we look at Android, we have a lot of different things, a lot of different options, a lot of different things that are available across different devices, and you're not going to see the same assistive technology that's there. The primary ones will be there, but you'll see different settings, different things that are there, because the manufacturers can alter the actual operating system. The underlying code that we're producing impacts accessibility. If we're not building into the underlying code the things that are needed for the assistive technology to interpret what's on the screen, then there's not going to be a product that's very accessible. The browsers or even the code framework. So if we're looking at a website that can be loaded in a browser, or we're looking at a native application, one that runs right from the operating system on your device is called a native application. That code framework that you're coding in, or HTML for websites, if you're not, if the browser doesn't support certain things and we don't have good support for the HTML or the ARIA coding, ARIA stands for Accessible Rich Internet Application. It's a specification to add in attributes that helps communicate information to assistive technology. If the browsers don't support that, or if the code framework doesn't allow you to do something or enter in something, for example, on Android, you can't actually define something as a heading. So there's no way to navigate by headings. On iOS there is. You can define something as a heading, although you can't define something like in HTML with the different heading levels. So when we're looking at the capabilities, really what's available within and supported by the browsers and the different code frameworks is going to impact the level of accessibility that you can achieve. And also the end users are responsible. If the end users don't know how to use the assistive technology or don't know that setting is available or how to use their device, then they may not have the optimal experience either. So when we're looking at mobile devices, the accessibility really varies by platform, sometimes by device manufacturer and operating system version. When we're looking at Android, using the latest version of the operating system is recommended. The earlier versions of the operating system, even though accessibility was built into 4.0, it really didn't have a good level of accessibility support. It really wasn't until 4.2 that we really started getting some features that really started making Android a viable platform for many users who have disabilities, from low vision to screen reader usage. And now in the latest version, there's many more features, and we'll give you an overview of those shortly. On iOS, accessibility has been implemented since iOS 3. It is recommended that we use iOS 6 and above just because of the number of features and functions and the capabilities of the assistive technology have come so far in the last releases. And as I'll talk about in a little bit, iOS 9 is going to have even more features available for users, and it keeps getting better and better and easier for all users to use these devices. When we're looking at the mobile assistive technology, one of the things that always fascinates me is when I come across headlines on blog posts where people are just thrilled that they found these accessibility settings. Since I've got on the side, I've got some of the headlines, and I'm going to read them out now. Android accessibility settings, 5 hidden options that everyone should be using. The secret powers hidden in your iPhone accessibility options. 5 amazing hidden accessibility settings for Android users. Cool iPad features hidden in accessibility settings. And the list could go on and on and on. There are so many blog posts about the assistive technology that's built into the device because it not just helps users who have a disability who need this in order to interact with their device, but it helps all users. And many users are using these features, which encourages developers to ensure that these features are built in. So we're seeing mobile actually having a greater level of accessibility a lot of the times than desktop. And when we're looking at native applications, because so much is actually built into the code frameworks, accessibility is automatically being built in, and their developers don't even really have to think about it. It's just automatically there. There's still things that developers need to do. There's things that need to be done, things that you need to think about. But overall, if you don't even think about accessibility and you code it, you're still at a higher level of accessibility often than you'll ever have on a desktop application. Some of the features that are built in are screen readers and text-to-speech. We've got screen magnifiers. We've got different color settings, text settings, captioning and video description and LED, vibration alerts, different switch control that's there. I now have a demo. This is where those videos are. Again, those videos are available on YouTube. They're not captioned. You would have to come in here and look at the transcript from the transcription here to get that. We did not have time to transcribe those as I went along, but I have a short video of some of the accessibility settings. So I'm going to go ahead and get that loaded and start playing that. Again, and this will go through your audio, so I'm going to put myself on mute. I will pause it at one point to talk
Apple
about
devices such as iPhones and iPads provide many different accessibility settings. These can be found under Settings, General, Accessibility. Under the Accessibility menu, there's many different options, such as tools for people who've got vision impairments, hearing impairments, those who need help with learning and interaction. One of the tools under this menu is VoiceOver. VoiceOver is a screen reader. If I go into the VoiceOver menu, I have options to change the speaking rate. I can speak hints. I can change the different speech and braille settings. I also can change options of what I'd like to do as far as navigation. The rotor is the way that you can navigate by certain types of elements. If I go into the rotor settings, you can see that there's many different options. Some of them will be selected and some of them won't be. If you want to navigate by a certain content type, then you'll select these. One of the options that isn't selected by default is landmarks. Landmarks are helpful on web pages when either HTML5 section elements or ARIA landmarks are defined. So you may want to check that. To turn on VoiceOver, you have a couple different options. You can navigate to this menu and you can turn it on VoiceOver using switch next to the VoiceOver text.
VoiceOver on, settings.
And you can turn it on and off by simply selecting the button. Another option,
VoiceOver on, VoiceOver off.
Another option is to use the accessibility shortcut. The accessibility shortcut can be turned on by going back to the main accessibility menu, and at the bottom there's an option for accessibility shortcut. Under accessibility shortcut, you can choose which assistive technology or tools you'd like to automatically turn on or off when you triple click on the home button. Right now I have all of them selected, including VoiceOver, invert colors, grayscale, zoom, switch control, and assistive touch. When all of these are turned
All right, so one of the things that I wanted to mention here is that the triple click home is actually really convenient to use. overall. If you're just wanting one assistive technology, so for example, if you just want to test with just VoiceOver, it's helpful just to have VoiceOver selected. Then when you triple click on the home button, it'll automatically just turn on VoiceOver, and it won't give you the other options that you're going to see in the video. So I'm going to continue playing the
All these
video.
are turned on when I triple click on the home button. I'll get all of these options here, and I can turn on or off the different assistive technology. All right, so let's go ahead and turn on VoiceOver.
VoiceOver on. Settings.
All right, I'm going to go back to the home screen by simply clicking on the home button.
FaceTime.
VoiceOver will automatically read the first thing that's on the screen. I can then swipe left or right to move to the previous or next item.
Calendar. Sunday, July 12th. Photos. Calendar. Sunday, July 12th. Photos.
Or I can simply drag my finger around the screen and VoiceOver will read whatever I'm touching.
Photo booth. Settings. Test flight. Dock. Music.
All right, I want to try and find Safari, so I'm going to move over, since I know it's usually on my home area at the bottom of the screen. I'm going to simply move my finger around until I get to Safari.
Safari.
All right, I found Safari. Now, once Safari is selected, to activate Safari, I have to double tap. But I don't have to double tap exactly on that icon. I can double tap anywhere on the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and just double tap somewhere near the top of the screen.
Safari. Skip to content. In page link.
All right, so now I've opened up Safari and I'm on the W3C Way website. To navigate on the web page, I've got a couple different options. I can swipe left or right just to go to the next or previous item. I can also tell VoiceOver to read from the top of the screen down to the bottom. Or I have some options that I can, for example, navigate by headings if I'm looking for some specific content on the screen. To navigate by headings, I use the rotor. Remember when we were in the general settings, general accessibility settings under VoiceOver, there was the option to turn on different options in the rotor. If I hold two fingers on the screen and turn them like a dial, I'll have the rotor settings show up.
Handwriting. Lowercase.
All right, now I can move it to until I see headings.
Links. Form controls. Tables. Lists. Landmarks. Buttons.
I just wanted to pause it here for just a minute. This is actually a really exciting feature that VoiceOver has, and it's very powerful. The one thing that is helpful to know is that to activate this, you put two fingers on the screen and you have to turn it like a dial. But you don't have to turn your whole hand. You can actually lift up one finger and just flick it in order to turn that dial. I've seen a number of people actually try to keep turning and turning and turning, and if you see how many I actually have to go through here to actually navigate to headings, you wouldn't be able to do that with one keystroke. So you can lift up and actually go through and easily get to the different items on the rotor without having to keep both hands and just turning it like a dial, because it gets really difficult.
Text fields. Vertical navigation. Characters. Words. Lines. Speech rate. Containers. Headings. 36 headings.
All right, so I've turned it to headings. Now, once headings are turned on, I can swipe up or down to go to the next or previous heading. Left or right swiping moves to the next or previous item. So for example, if I wanted to go to the For Review Digital Publishing Way ARIA Module Working Draft, then I can go into swipe up or down to get to that heading.
What WAI does. Heading level 2. Site navigation. Heading level 2. Web Accessibility Initiative. WAI. Heading level 1. Announcements. Heading level 2. Events, meetings, presentations, documents in progress. Heading level sidebar. Heading level 2. Highlights. Heading level 2. For review, digital publishing. WAI module working draft. Heading level 3.
All right, so that allowed me to cycle through all of the headings. Now that I found the item that I'd like to read, I can now swipe left to right to get into that content.
Digital Publishing WAI Only Module 1.0 link is available for review as a first public working draft. This specification extends WAI Only 1.1 link to facilitate automated processing and accessibility support for digital publications. For more information, see the call for review, Digital Publishing WAI Only Module working draft link.
All right, so you can easily go through. I can also just go and explore the screen. If I know generally where something is on the screen, say on the sidebar or in the left-hand side where I've got the menu, I can easily just drag my finger around the screen and VoiceOver will read whatever I'm touching.
Web Accessibility Initiative, Designing for Inclusion link. Guidelines and Techniques link. Reader available.
All right, so once I've selected a link, I can then double tap anywhere on the screen. So that's the basics of how to use VoiceOver. Okay, now I'm going to triple tap on the home button to turn off VoiceOver.
Alert accessibility options. Selected VoiceOver button. Selected VoiceOver off.
All right, let's go back to the accessibility settings and explore some of the other options that are available.
All right, I'm just going to pause it here for just a second. This demo is actually on iOS 8. It's on the latest release. And so if you're on a version and you don't have iOS 8 installed, or maybe you've even got the preview of iOS 9, but you will see some differences in where things are located. They have moved up accessibility up in the menu under general settings in iOS 8, and there's some additional options that weren't available before. So you may see some differences, but generally the things that we're talking about right now are available across most of the different versions.
Under Vision, I've got options to zoom, which simply allows me to magnify the screen. I've got an option of magnifying the entire screen, or I can use kind of like a magnifying glass that I can drag around the screen. Invert colors will change the colors from a light background to a dark background. It does make it easier for some users who've got light sensitivity or who prefer a dark background with white text. I can also change everything to grayscale. I can turn on larger text. When I turn on larger text, I've got a couple different options. I've got this little option up the top to turn on larger accessibility sizes. If I turn that off, you'll see that I still can change the text size, and I can drag the slider to change the overall text size of items. When I turn on larger accessibility sizes, I have even more options in that I've got now a larger range of accessibility sizes to choose from. I can also turn and change the way things are viewing. For example, I can turn on button shapes. If you look at the general back button at the top of the screen, right now it's showing with an arrow with the word general. If I turn on button shapes, it'll then outline that and put it in a gray background so it looks more like a button. I've also got options for increasing contrast, such as reducing transparency, darkening colors, or reducing the white point. I can also turn on and off labels. This is interesting in that it puts in ones and zeros with switch controls, for example, so that you're not relying on color alone. I've got options for hearing, which is hearing aids, mono audio. I also have options to automatically turn on and off captioning and subtitles. I can also change the style, and I can create my own style, or I can use one of the styles that are provided. I also can turn on and off video descriptions if they are available. Video descriptions are for those who have visual impairments who may miss some content in the visuals of the video, and this is an additional audio track that would play to give the user the same information. There's also options for learning. Guided access allows, for example, a teacher in a classroom to lock a student into a particular section of an application. You can set time limits. It really helps them keep them focused. There's a number of options for interaction. Switch control allows you to connect to an external switch device, such as a button, or you can even use the screen to tap on, or you could use the camera and move your head to left and right to activate the different options on the screen. Assistive touch allows you to customize gestures, allows you to program in gestures that require maybe 3 fingers or multiple sequences of things to make them easier for certain users to use. So those are some basics of the different accessibility settings on iOS.
All right, so as you can see, iOS has a lot of different settings. Most of these settings are things that you can actually, if you have an application, a native application, you can actually query these settings and know whether or not these have been turned on or off, and you can have your application actually respond to these different events. And so, for example, if I turn on larger text, I can have my application automatically respond to the text that is displayed on the screen. I now want to show you a shorter video of Android and some of the features here. Again, I'm on the latest version of the Android platform. This demo is done on a Nexus device, which is Google's device, and so it always gets the latest version of the operating system, which is why I like it. It's also not customized in any way, so it's really got the native features that the operating system puts there. If you've got a different device, you may see the accessibility settings in a different location. You also may see things in different features and that are built into that particular device.
Kathy, before you start that, there was a question from Beth Sullivan that I thought that relates to the iOS video that I thought you might want to address. Her question is, can you see that?
Yeah, I can see it. Actually, it was still there. So for text resize WCAG tests on mobile, what level of display text size do you test with? And that's a really good question. And it's actually been a fairly lively discussion on when the working group, the task force under W3C. And when we're looking at text resize, typically what we're doing is looking at 200%. And right now we're going through and actually doing some additional tests to see if that needs to be adjusted or if there's some other way of doing it. But because we've got so many different screen resolutions, different dot point sizes, different things, there is some differences across for text sizes. When one thing to note is if in iOS you turn on the accessibility sizes, so remember I showed in the video where you could actually change the text sizes, which were the regular text. When you turn on the accessibility sizes, you'll see that the applications actually respond much differently than if you don't have the accessibility sizes on. When you turn on the accessibility sizes, actually not the full screen actually changes text sizes. It's only certain things. So for example, things that would typically break if you had a larger type in there, such as navigation bars and icon. Those things don't actually increase in size, but the main content would. All right, yes, I'm not showing any slides right now, so I will be starting the video in just a minute. I just wanted to answer that question first. All right, so on iOS or on Android, we've got some similar features. We just don't have as many features as we do on iOS. So I want to go ahead and show you and demonstrate some of these. Again, this is just a high-level view of the accessibility features that are there, given the time frame for this webinar. So let's get this video started.
TalkBack provides accessibility settings to help users use their mobile phones and tablets. The accessibility settings can be found under Settings, and under the Settings menu, there's several different groupings. Under System, there's an option for accessibility. The accessibility menu provides a number of different options for users, including TalkBack, which is this Android's screen reader. If I go into TalkBack, there are options to customize TalkBack, and if you go into Settings, you want to make sure that a few things are turned on and make sure that they're not turned off. Explore by Touch. Explore by Touch allows you to drag your finger around the screen and TalkBack will read what's underneath it. If that's not checked, you will not be able to explore the screen using touch. There's also options to change the speaking rate, the volume levels, and you can change a number of the different gestures, keeping in mind that you can't create your own gestures, but you can customize and map them to be what you want them to be. One of the settings that I like is under the developer settings, in that you can have TalkBack display the speech. So you can, as TalkBack is speaking, it'll put the speech at the bottom of the screen of what TalkBack is saying. If you're new to TalkBack, when you've got it turned on, there is a Explore by Touch tutorial. So you can turn on and go through that Explore by Touch tutorial. It'll walk you through the basics of TalkBack. All right, so TalkBack is turned off. To turn it on, you will need to turn on the switch.
Navigate up button.
All right. When TalkBack is turned on, you can use gestures such as swiping left to right to move to the next item and right to left to go to the previous item.
TalkBack. Search. Settings.
All right, I'm going to go back to the home screen.
Home. Home.
All right, now I can explore this screen by either swiping left or right to go to the next or previous item, or I can simply drag my finger around the screen.
Folder. Google. Folder. Create. Settings. Play Store. Remove. Double tap to select. Double. Camera. Photos. YouTube. Apps. Chrome.
All right, so this is Chrome. To activate something once it's selected, I have to double tap. And I can double tap anywhere on the screen.
Chrome.
All right, so we're on the W3C Way website. Now, there's a couple different options to navigate the screen. You can swipe left or right to go to the next or previous items. You can also go to the context menu to navigate through the different items. So this is the context menu.
Touch the screen and explore in a circle to find an item, then lift to select.
Now, the circle is showing in the middle of the screen. I don't actually have to touch the middle screen. I can touch anywhere on the screen, and that will then be my circle. All right, so I have the options. Now I can select to read from the top. I can speak the last utterance. I can read the next item, or I've got this option called Quick Navigation. If I go into Quick Navigation,
Quick Navigation menu. Screen and explore in a circle to navigate on screen content, then lift to focus.
I now have a circle on the screen, and again, I can put my finger anywhere, and if I start navigating around that circle, I can go from one item to the next in this web page.
Chrome. Web new tab. Go back button. Go refresh page button. Button 81. Unlabeled. Bookmark this page button. Start book 1 open tabs button. More options button. Edit box. www.w3.org/y/. Web access. Skip to content. Change text size or colors.
Okay, so now I'm going through the different options on there. I don't know if you're hearing it. Chrome actually does a sound effect for the links. It doesn't say links. So let's go back to the skip to content. I'm just going to go back one item. Listen for the little sound effect.
Skip to content. Cancel.
All right, so this is giving
Change text size or colors.
me a little sound effect for the links. Chrome tends to use both sound effects and also sometimes announces the different types.
W3C logo. Web app, Y, strategies, guidelines, resources to make the web accessible to people with disabilities.
So I can navigate this way. It can be a little bit tedious, but it actually is sometimes a good way to understand what the reading order is on the page, how TalkBack is going to read.
Y, strategies, guidelines, resources to make the web accessible to people with disabilities.
All right, so I can now go and swipe left or right to go to the next or previous item.
What Y does. Y develops 3 period. Guidelines widely regarded as the international standard for web accessibility.
All right, so let's go ahead and turn off TalkBack. One of the easiest ways to actually pause TalkBack is to go back into that context menu.
The screen and explore in a circle to find an item, then lift to select.
To get to the context menu, you do a swipe down, then right, an L-shaped gesture. So if I hit pause TalkBack.
Pause feedback. Alert suspend TalkBack. Are you sure you want to suspend TalkBack? While TalkBack is suspended, your device will not provide feedback and Explore by Touch will be disabled. You can resume TalkBack from the notifications shader by returning to the lock screen. Always show this warning. Cancel. Okay.
All right, so it's telling me that if I do this, to turn it back on, it's going to be up in the top menu.
Okay button.
If you're new to TalkBack and you're just starting to play around with it, this might be an easier way for you to navigate instead of having to have TalkBack on while you go back to the settings. So now we can go back to the settings, go to accessibility, and we can go to TalkBack, and we can turn off TalkBack. Now TalkBack is turned off. All right, so let's go and talk about.
Okay, I'm just going to pause the video there for a minute and answer a few questions that we've had. So David brought up a really good question about, it's great to see all of these different features and know what's there, but what is it that we need to test with? What do we need to do to ensure accessibility? And that's a great question. When we're looking at, the things that can be, our underlying code can impact what is there on the device are the things that we need to test with. So if, for example, if I change a setting and I can do something with it, with my application, then it's something that I want to make sure that I can test to see if it does anything within the application, or maybe the application is actually handling and doing and providing that feature. For example, if an application has a text resize capability with it, then we don't necessarily have to have the settings work within the actual operating system. But I would actually, if I was going to tell the developers what to do, I would actually say, well, here, query what the settings are in the actual operating system, and then automatically default that to that text size, and then from there, if the user changes the text size, then you can store that and have that as the default. Some of the settings that you really, when you're looking at it, depends on whether or not you have a mobile website that's running in a browser or you've got a native application. The native applications have a lot more control over the different settings and what they do than a browser does. And so when we're looking at a mobile website, really testing with the screen reader is going to be key. You can test with magnification. Some of the browsers have magnification settings in there, or text resize, and you can test with that. You can also do pinch zoom within a web page. If you're looking at a native application, you can test the magnification, also the text size settings. On iOS, you've got a lot of contrast settings, so you can reduce the transparency, you can bold text, you can do all of that. Those are settings that you can actually control in the and listen for the application so you can actually honor those settings. You can also turn on the different options for button shapes and other things that are such as contrast settings. For example, you can, if you turn on higher contrast, your application can honor that, but that's not possible within a browser. So it depends on what you are looking at as far as testing and what you'll actually do. So when I'm testing in mobile application, what I do is I look at what things that it has control over and see if it actually does anything within the application. Then I also look at the features, because it's not, if you have that feature within the actual application, you don't necessarily have to support the operating system features, although it is highly recommended, because once the users set those settings, it's a better user experience for users to be able to automatically have that application honor those settings. I had another question about browsers. On Android, you can use both Chrome and Firefox as far as accessibility. They do work differently. So where I was mentioning just in this video that Chrome does that little sound effect for links, in Firefox it'll actually say link. So you will see some differences between the different browsers and how they speak things. Also, Firefox has a lot of keyboard shortcuts. So if you're testing with a keyboard, which is also something that I highly recommend, attach a Bluetooth keyboard and test with a keyboard as well as touch. So when we're looking at testing for accessibility on mobile, we're not just looking at these settings, but also the different input methods that are available. We had another comment about the accessibility shortcut. There is an accessibility shortcut, but you're right. It does not work on the tablet on a Nexus device. If you've got a Nexus phone, it does work. And so it depends on what platform you are, but yes, it does not work on the Nexus devices, so you can't actually use that. Okay, so is there any difference in testing 200 zoom only using the browser feature versus magnification software program like ZoomText? Yes, there always is differences in testing with magnification software. So if you're on a PC and testing with ZoomText, for example, ZoomText actually has X-font technology, which is the font smoothing. So you'll actually see the fonts actually be smoother. Also, there's a lot of different color settings. And programs like ZoomText, for example, have a lot of features available. So, for example, there's the Web Finder, which actually you can search and get information. And we've also got the Reader under ZoomText, and you can get all of that information out of ZoomText, so it's got a lot more features and functions than just doing Zoom within the browser. All right, so I just want to finish this video, and then we'll stop and we'll get some more questions.
About a few of the other accessibility settings. Switch access. This allows people with mobility impairments to connect a Bluetooth switch device to control their device. They can do this through a series of menus that get shown on the screen. Captions, and I can turn on, automatically turn on captions. Again, just like on iOS, I can set the default settings so I can say how I'd like my captions to be displayed on the screen. I also have options to change the display of text. I can do large text, I can do high contrast text, and then I also have a couple of options at the bottom, which is color inversion, which again changes the screen from, instead of having white with black, I can do black with white. I also have this option called color correction. Color correction is for people with color blindness. I can go in here and I choose what type of color blindness I have, and it'll update the colors to make it easier to read the screen. Android also provides a way to magnify the screen. You can go into magnification gestures and By triple tapping on the screen, you can zoom in and zoom out. Magnification on Android magnifies just the entire screen. So that's a few highlights of the accessibility features on Android.
Okay. So as you can see, Android doesn't have nearly the number of accessibility features as iOS does. And there are, even the capabilities within the different options. iOS has a lot more features and functions available. Although you may think, okay, well then does all users who have disabilities use iOS? And that's actually not the case. Android does have some advantages, and in fact, some users who have low vision have told me that they prefer the Android device because the Android's magnification is actually much better and easier for them to see, and it magnifies all of the setting boxes, and so that it's easier to actually use and navigate. We had a couple of other questions. I'm going to take those right now. So would the browser zoom feature be preferred to responsive design? And then we had another one as far as 200% increases is, should we be looking at that for mobile devices? Responsive design overall is key for mobile. You don't want to have a horizontal scroll bar and a vertical scroll bar. So wherever you have a responsive site that can adjust the layout based on the viewport size. So if I'm on my mobile phone, I've got a narrower width, and if I'm on a tablet, I've got a bigger width. If I can adjust that to the size, then you don't have that horizontal scroll bar, which makes it much easier for navigation. If you've tried to navigate using the both horizontal and vertical, you can get lost very, very quickly. And that's one of the biggest complaints from users with low vision, is that they don't want to have to do both horizontal and vertical scrolling. All right, so accessibility improves with every release. There's new features, new functions available. And with iOS 9, there are a lot of new features, again, that are coming. Some of those I wanted to highlight right here is touch accommodations. There's a lot of new functions available for hold duration, for ignoring repeat, for tap assistance. Some of those were available in iOS 8. You could actually do some of the hold duration, but you couldn't do some of the other features. Shake to undo is actually, if you shake the phone or tablet, it'll actually stop or will undo what you just did. You can turn that on or off. Another interesting thing is that there's some additional features and functions going to be available within Safari. And now you can go through and choose the new fonts. You can do pinch zoom within videos. You can also change the background colors and the text size right within there. So they're going to have a little A, big A type functionality right within there. So that's coming, and as always with mobile, things are moving very quickly. New features and new functions are available, so it's in more than desktop, it's harder to keep up with all of the different changes. All right, so let's talk a little bit about corporate mobile strategies and what you can do. The first thing, the question I usually get is, what do we support? What platforms make sense for accessibility? When we're looking at the different platforms, really looking at what your support is overall. So just for general audiences, what platforms are you supporting? And then look at what platforms make sense for accessibility. If a device doesn't have the assistive technology, doesn't have the settings, the tools that makes it viable platform, then you're not going to have to worry about accessibility on that platform because it's just not possible to make it accessible. You want to look also at supporting the mobile assistive technology and settings. And we talked a little bit about this earlier with, what do you test with, what are the different settings. Absolutely testing with screen reader access, screen magnification or text resize, and also the text and contrast settings are really key. Those are the primary things that can be modified within your application and that you need to do. Also, you need to accommodate for different input methods. So looking at a Bluetooth keyboard access and touch is really key. Bluetooth keyboard works fully on Android. When you hook up the Bluetooth keyboard on iOS, it doesn't work completely. You can't get to all of the different areas, all the different links. You can go in between form controls and that's it. So on iOS, it is only possible to have full keyboard access when VoiceOver is turned on. When VoiceOver is turned on, then you have different functions that you can do for quick navigation. And once quick nav is turned on, then you've got different function keys just like you have on JAWS or NVDA on the desktop, where you can press H to go to different headings, for example, and you've got different options there. So when we're looking at kind of a strategy overall, you're going to look at what are you supporting overall? What then makes sense for accessibility? Look at supporting the mobile assistive technology and settings where it makes sense, and that's going to differ for a website versus an application, and you want to allow for different input methods. So it is important to test with a Bluetooth keyboard. There's actually a really good Bluetooth keyboard available. I got it on Amazon. It actually switches between Windows, Android, and iOS, and it's actually pretty convenient. So I can use one keyboard to access all of my different devices. All right, so the big question that I also get is, does WCAG 2.0, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, apply to mobile? So go ahead and put your answers in. I'm going to hold questions now until the end of the presentation because we're running out of time. All right, so most of you agree that mobile or WCAG does apply to mobile, and that's good to hear. The WCAG does apply to mobile. When we're looking at the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, it was really designed to be forward-looking. It is, when we've gone through, the task force has gone through and looked at all of the different guidelines, we couldn't anticipate all the new things, the new ways that we're interacting, the new technologies, and we're going to be talking about a few of those things now. So there are some things that are important that are not currently mentioned specifically, or techniques for under WCAG 2.0, but the Mobile Accessibility Task Force is working on those, and we're working on getting those out. We already have a note that I'll talk about in a minute. So when we're looking at really the guidelines, mobile accessibility guidelines for mobile, we've got the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. We've also got the user agent, and if you're doing a native application, there's guidance under the UAG guidelines as well. There's also the work that's being done on Indie UI. And then there's some additional resources as well, and if you go to w3.org/way/mobile, there's a list of all of those different resources that are there. So UAG has a number of references for mobile accessibility, and specifically it provides guidances for mobile user interfaces. The UAG mobile examples have things such as, setting preferences for text display, which is 1.4.1, and it gives you a use case for each of for the different things that are important. So you can go through these different examples, and it gives you a good idea of what is important on mobile to really support for users who are accessing the device differently or with some assistive technology. The NDUI work that's being done is all about events for user interface independence. And this isn't quite there yet, but this is where we're going, in that if somebody's using touch, or if somebody's using a scroll bar, or somebody's using a mouse or a keyboard or simply voice, that is all one different thing. And the NDUI event would simply say, hey, web application or application, this is what we're doing, and all of those things would then mean the same. It doesn't matter how the user is actually interacting with it. So no matter the modality, if it's keyboard, mouse, touch, gesture, speech, the raw input would be the same and sent the appropriate event to the web application. So that'll be really nice when we don't have to worry about testing for all of the different ones, and it automatically works no matter which way that we're accessing in the device. The Mobile Accessibility Task Force has an accessibility note. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's got some really good guidance as well as an appendix on the different techniques that apply to mobile. It doesn't replace WCAG 2.0. It's an addition to it. And again, that is available. We had the first public working draft out in February 26th, and we're currently working on more techniques for mobile. So it contains advice to developers, both for designers and developers for web and native apps. It directly addresses some of the characteristics that are specific to mobile, those things that are, in WCAG, but could be more best practices where no real WCAG success criteria currently applies. If you're looking for a list of what WCAG techniques currently apply to mobile, there is an appendix in this note where you can get all of the techniques under general HTML scripting and failure techniques. It is a temporary document until the quick reference has a filter for mobile. So we will be getting that integrated, and they're currently working on that. But for now, there is an appendix where you can get all of this information. So does coding for mobile improve accessibility? So very quickly, if you could put in your answers into the poll. All right, so yes, it does, 100% so far. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. And the answer is really coding really does improve, but not always, right? We need to be thinking about responsive design. We need to be talking about mobile first, and really making sure that we are designing for the different ways that people are going to be interacting, both with touch, with smaller screens, with different orientations, and there's a lot more to really think about as far as the different interaction patterns that users have when they're using mobile. Some of the things that are contained in the note, and you can get more detail, I'm going to go over them fairly quickly, are things under perceivable, where we've got smaller screen sizes. So we've got practical limits on how much information people can actually view at one time. We've got challenges with magnification when it's used by people with low vision. So we need to support the different device settings and the tools for content resizing. Contrast is also critical on a mobile device, because more and more we're out in bright areas with our devices. We're not just using it in an office or in a location where it's easy to see. When we're looking at responsive design, WCAG 1.3.2, meaningful sequence, is really key in knowing whether or not your responsive design is going to be usable for people who are accessing it using a screen reader, for example. And 1.3.2 says when the sequence of which the content is presented affects meaning, a correct reading sequence can be programmatically determined. And really what we're looking for here is that the sequence in which the information is presented still makes sense. It doesn't have to be in the exact order from layout to layout. So I don't have to keep it in the same order if I have on my desktop or on my tablet or my phone, but I need to make sure that that sequence still makes sense and the information is presented in a way that's going to be meaningful and not confusing. Under operable, keyboard control for touchscreen devices is key, and we talked about this. But some other things that we need to be thinking about is touch target size and spacing. These aren't things that we were thinking about under WCAG because we didn't have touch interfaces at the time when we were actually looking at this. But having the appropriate text size, and there's some guidance under both the Android and the iOS developers guides and design guides for the appropriate sizes on those particular devices. Touchscreen gestures and the device manipulation gestures. And as we saw, iOS 9 has got the new feature for shaking. There's also other features that can be built in, and if we've got custom gestures and other things that we're customizing that users may not be aware of, we need to make sure that they're aware of and know how to use the different gestures that are available. We also need to think about placing buttons where they're easy to access. And iOS has addressed this partially by having the ability to scroll that screen down, the top of the screen down to the second half of the screen so it's easier to reach. So some of these things are being addressed by the devices, and some of the things are things that we still need to be thinking about when we're designing and creating applications or websites. Under understandable, we need to be thinking about changing the screen orientation from portrait to landscape and how that impacts the user's experience. We need to have consistent layouts, making sure that we're positioning important information before the page scroll. There's been some interesting research out there about page scroll and mobile devices, and there's been some research recently saying that, users are scrolling, but still we have that, reachability aspect of in getting to important information. Grouping operable elements that perform the same action. This is a technique from, WCAG where you can group elements together, and this is actually more important on mobile because we've got smaller touch screens and it needs to be easier to actually touch. Also making sure that we have a clear indication that elements are actionable. More and more, we're not using the standard way of saying what things are. And we've got areas that we can swipe, we've got areas that we can touch, we've got different things. So having the different affordances there that tell the user, hey, this is clickable is key also for accessibility. When we look at being robust, we need to make sure that we're supporting the features and the functions that are available on the device. For example, we can set the virtual keyboard to the type of data. And if you, for example, entering in a phone number, it's good to have the key number pad show up. Also, you need to be thinking about mobile support. You need to check the support for HTML5 and ARIA. Right now, there is still just partial support for HTML5 and ARIA, and you can go to caniuse.com and you can do a search and you can look at the overall support. And I've got a graphic on the screen that shows right now that across iOS Safari, the Android browser, Chrome for Android, and Firefox for Android, we really have a partial support. So in summary, mobile has changed the way that people are accessing information. Mobile accessibility is just as important as desktop accessibility, and if you look at the way users are consuming, we're not just accessing things on the desktop, but we're looking at mobile too. And mobile accessibility impacts all users, not just users with disabilities. So by implementing and thinking about accessibility, really we're looking at making sure that all users can access it. And really the same principles apply. WCAG applies to mobile. Sometimes we just need to be thinking about the different ways that users are interacting and more about the usability of how users are going to be interacting and how they're going to be looking and using the different devices. All right, with that, Sharon, I know we're in the last 5 minutes. I haven't been looking at the chat window, so I don't know if there's any big questions we should address, or if you wanted me to talk a little bit about the pre-conference workshop as well right now.
Why don't you share with everyone about the workshop, and then we can go back and look and see if there are any questions that you haven't already addressed.
Okay, great.
In the chat.
Okay, great. So I want to let everybody know about the pre-conference workshop. If you enjoyed today's session, I am going to be giving an all-day session on mobile accessibility. This is going to be a hands-on workshop where you'll actually get in and try out the different assistive technology. We'll also be talking about a lot of strategies for testing, talking about what you can do. I know there's been a lot of questions about, what do we test with, how do we test. I will have before and after examples of what works well, what doesn't work well. So one of the hardest things on mobile is actually knowing when something sounds right, when it's good, when it's bad, and we've developed some before and after examples where you can actually get in there and see it, and so you'll know what's good and what's bad. So when you're testing for accessibility, you'll know what it's supposed to sound like, what the capabilities are on there. We will be talking more about the different types of mobile content, including responsive design, native applications, and hybrid applications. Hybrid applications are web applications that contain, they're native applications that contain web content, and you can also actually have web content that contains a application. So we'll be talking about the challenges and things that you need to be thinking about there. We'll also be talking about some of the techniques, and right now there should be a release of some mobile techniques before the conference that I can get into. So really this is going to be a hands-on session that's going to go into a lot more detail than what we've been able to do in this short webinar today. So if you need more information on the conference, you can go to accessibilityassociation.org/access2015. And again, that's going to be on October 21st from 8 to 5 p.m. If you have a mobile device, we're recommending that you bring it, but I will have a lab of both iOS and Android devices, so if you don't have it, this is your opportunity to get this information and actually try out the devices. I'll also have some switch devices and other assistive technology so you can play around with much more than even just the device. So I look forward to seeing all of you there, and I hope all of you guys can come to the conference. All right, so was there any questions that I didn't answer? I know we've got just a few minutes left. Sharon, did you see any questions? I didn't.
Kathy, I'm not sure which ones you ultimately got to or not. Why don't you start at the bottom and work backwards, and let's try to, we only have 4 minutes because we do need to end at 12:30, but let's see if you can handle as many as possible.
Okay. We can also take this offline and into the chat, so we can go to the connections and you can put questions there, and I'd be happy to answer your questions as well. So if I don't address them, that's the way too. All right, so are there any expectations, hope that mobile guidelines draft for WCAG 2.0 will be included in the Section 508 refresh? The techniques are going to be part of WCAG. They're not going to be separate. Right now we're looking at including those. How they actually get concluded into WCAG is still being discussed. So Section 508 refresh references WCAG, so you will have those available as well under the Section 508. All right, so let's, having a hard time following the conversation scrolling backwards. All right, I think I answered the questions in the talk. Did anybody have, if you had one that I didn't answer, if you could put it in the chat window, that might be easier and I can address it much quicker. Claudia, I didn't propose that for CISA in 2016, but that's a great idea. I can definitely see if I can do it, do something at CISA.
So Kathy, while we're waiting to see if there are, let's see, the comment, Rob said the BBC has created a free set of guidelines that are very good, and he provided the link there. That's great. And then John said the keyboard you mentioned for iOS and Android. So Kathy, can you address that? the
Yeah, I'm
keyboard?
just looking up the link to see if I can actually find it very quickly. If not, I'll post it to connections.
While you're looking for that, why don't I do a few wrap-up items, and then, like you said, hopefully you can post it in the chat. But so first off, I just want to thank Kathy for doing such a fabulous job. Great content, a lot of information in a short amount of time. So Kathy, thank you so much for putting this together. I know it's always a lot of effort, and you really did a fabulous presentation.
Thank you.
And I also want to thank our captionist. Annette Blau is with TCS Associates, and Annette always does a fabulous job for us keeping up with all of this technical information. So I'm not quite sure how she does it, but she does a great job. So thank you, Annette. And then I'm going to go ahead and move to the slide that shows the link for the feedback survey. So we have a link right here on this slide, or we will in the post-webinar email that we send out. We'll also provide a link for all of you to the feedback survey. We really appreciate everyone filling out the survey and providing us with your input. And I do want to point out that Kathy did put the link to the information about the keyboard in the chat area, so that's there for you. We do have some great webinars coming up that I hope you can join us. In August, we have EPUB 3, Marching to Replace PDF as the Standard for Accessible Published Materials. In September, we have Building Accessibility to Address Cognitive Impairments. And October, we have the Making of an Accessible iOS App for Non-Visual Access. And November is latest developments in accessible math in browsers and ebooks. And all of that is up on the IAAP website. And then, as Kathy mentioned, for those of you who are members of IAAP, we will open up a community within IAAP Connections, and that will be just for the registrants of this webinar so that you all can continue to discuss the content that was presented here today, or even ask some additional questions. And watch for the post-webinar email. That will be an indication of when that community has been opened. And you'll be automatically, everyone who's registered for the webinar will be automatically subscribed to that particular community. So I think that's it. As I said, we'll be sending you an email that has the link to the feedback survey. It will also include a link to the recording for today's webinar. So all of you who've registered for this live broadcast also get access to the copy of the recording. So we'll get that out to you just as soon as we can. Usually that email comes within a day or two. So that's it. To close out of today's webinar, all you need to do is close Adobe Connect, close your browser, and hang up the phone, and that gets you out of today's webinar. So again, I want to thank Kathy for doing such a great job. I want to thank all of you for joining us. I hope I'll see you at the IAAP conference coming up October 21st through the 23rd, and in particular at Kathy's pre-conference, which is that Wednesday, October 21st. And I hope you'll be able to join us for future webinars. So everyone, thank you so much, and have a great day.